And we're back. You're listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Radio Network. I am joined here by Christine McKay, who is an internationally recognized media guest, international speaker, and author of the book, Why Not Ask, and a negotiation specialist. So, Christine, I want to dive into some of my favorite topics, which is David versus Goliath. And the reason why it's one of my favorite topics is because we at Exitology very often will be working with a lower middle market company who is very capable and a lot more nimble than some of these larger companies. So in our case, what we do a lot of times is reverse engineer a lot of the strategy and success tactics that somebody is using, and we use it to generate more revenue or decrease client concentration risk and things of this nature. So a little bit more offense, I guess. Now, negotiation can be offense or defense, and so you were telling me on the break, and I'm wondering if maybe you could walk our listeners through some of these interesting things behind the art and science of negotiation that you do when you're doing a David versus Goliath negotiation. And maybe start by telling us, what is a David versus Goliath negotiation?
So David and Goliath negotiation is when somebody perceives that the party they're negotiating with has more power or leverage than they do, and then they act that way. They act like they have limited power or leverage. And so, and really, to be honest, I find that leverage is something that you voluntarily give up. We all have it. If we're negotiating with somebody and we're at the table with them, there's a reason why they're at the table with us. And so we acquiesce and voluntarily acquiesce our power and our leverage. The ultimate power is always walking away from the table. But when you are trying to get to an agreement, right, it comes from, there are all sorts of things that you can do to make sure that you are demonstrating your own power and leverage. And the greatest one, it comes back to the word of the show, of this episode, is really around clarity. The more clarity you have, and they're kind of, the other aspect is around values, knowing your values before your value. And the more clarity you have on your values as both a company and as an individual, that makes it harder to kind of get pulled off of kind of a center place because you know what you're trying to do. Go ahead.
So there's a couple things here that I want to call out because I think this is really important. One is, we think of negotiation, I think a lot of times as business owners, as this event that happens. People show up to the table, we all start out here and we negotiate our way down until everybody's pissed off enough to come to this center and we walk away unhappy, right? Because that's what a great compromise is. Or, if that doesn't work, then I throw all these bombs over the proverbial wall and wait until what happens. If people don't move the direction that I want, then I stand there and, use certain targeted words to just draw this thing out. But you're saying that none of this is true, basically. In fact, you're saying that most of the work is done before it even takes place because of that word clarity. If I'm clear on who and what we are, if I'm clear on what our mission is, if I'm clear on what our culture is and all of these other things, it seems to me that I can go into negotiation and absolutely maintain walkout power the moment I walk in and depending on any outcome. So is that correct? I mean, it's all in the pre-work?
70 to 80% of negotiation is all in the preparation. I posted a video on our Venn negotiation YouTube channel, and I was talking about how if you propose something to me when I'm negotiating with you and I agree to it, it's because I've already evaluated it. I've already thought about that idea. I already anticipated that you might ask me that question, and I had already made a decision about whether I could accept that or not. If you ask me to accept a position and I say I need to think about it, it means that's something new that I hadn't thought about, and I need to go evaluate it. in the big scheme of the deal. Now,
Right.
the thing is that when we isolate negotiation down to price, that's that's one of the biggest, I don't know if it's number one, but it's one of the biggest problems I see people do in negotiation.
Okay.
Price is an answer to a math problem. I don't give a darn what the price is. I
Right.
care how you got to it. I want to understand what's the math problem. Because then
Okay.
if we can get to an agreement on how to calculate the answer, then the answer doesn't matter, right? I
Right.
don't care what the price is. I
Right.
care about the math problem. And so when I'm in David and Goliath negotiations, one of the things that Goliaths often do is they'll say, you'll say, well, why is that? And a horrible question to use in negotiation is why. And here's the reason. Why are you doing that? Why that price? Because it's just how we do things. Because, right? And so when I hear because, there are some triggers for me. If I hear because, I know they're BSing me. If I hear people talking in superlatives, if they talk about the best, the worst, the most, the least, better than, worse than, etc., I know they're exaggerating. That
Okay.
is a clue for me that there are other questions I need to ask. And that's the thing about negotiating, right? Negotiating is 100% emotional. The decision to do a deal or not is based entirely on how we feel
Mm.
about the deal and the people that we're doing the deal with. And negotiation is not a point in time event, which is how I define, it's not the meeting. It is all the work before the meeting. And then I'm just testing my hypothesis and refining it to find
Okay.
that common ground and to create understanding, right? Yeah, it's just, I think that we get stuck thinking that it is the meeting, it's
Yeah.
the phone call, and it's not. It's the relationship. I just celebrated 30 years of marriage to my amazing husband.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I can tell you that the deal that we entered into 30 years ago is not entirely the same deal we have today, right?
Right. Right.
It's different. Our lives are different. Where we're at is different, all of that stuff. And so, negotiating is about the breadth of your relationship. If all you're doing is boiling it down to this moment in time and this specific transaction, you're actually leaving massive amounts of value and money on the table.
Yeah, there's so much that I love about what you're talking about there, but specifically the idea of doing and taking very seriously the process and the journey of negotiation and being prepared. And the other part that I think is very interesting and important is what you shared about every negotiation being a emotional decision. And so it really speaks to the importance, of course, a lot of what we do is on the buyer psychology side of things. And it's an old saw, but it still proves true every single day, which is that you buy on emotion and you justify with logic. And so I love how you explained your methodology a little bit about helping to unpack the formula over here, which is very much logical because we know we're going to be at some point making the emotional decision to, quit, retry, or fail, right? So we've got to make that decision and then back it up with that formula. Um, a question that I would like to maybe unpack a little bit about the methodology is you've been involved lately with you are actively, knee deep, shirt sleeves rolled up into a number of these David versus Goliath negotiations. And um, when you're walking in there and you have, I don't want to say you have dirt on people, but you have intel on people and you kind of know where you think they're going to be heading with their positions or their asks. How how does that work? How do you go about thinking through who the other people on the other side of the table are? How do you go through understanding where they might want to be incentivized to move in your direction? Just how does all that part work?
Well, part of it is personally, I've been doing negotiation for almost 30 years. So I've seen a lot of people in a lot of deals, and I've negotiated in 55 countries. So I've seen a lot of people in a lot of deals across the entire globe.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are fairly predictable. So I can look at like this. I have a client in the UK, and they're negotiating with a more of a David, not even a huge David in and of their own right, but a David to my client. And the guy that my client was negotiating was he started out being kind of an ass, and my client is he's a nice guy, and he hates the confrontation of negotiation, and at Venn negotiation we love other people's hard conversations. And so I learned about the counterpart, and I said to my client, I said, oh, okay, well, given what you've described, how you've described your counterpart, this is what I think they're going to do next. This is who I think they're going to, this is the actions they're going to take. This is what they're going to come back and tell you. And this is how you should respond. Now, over time, he was so belligerent that we isolated him and made him kind of a universe of one, and developed a strategy for how to bring in other people in that organization to move the conversation forward.
Yeah.
And we developed essentially a map that said, okay, person A is going to do this. This is their role. This is who they are. This is how they're going to behave. Person B is this. And we essentially created a map of all the players or all of the people involved on our counterpart side, and predicted how they would respond. And I think the thing that blew our client away so much was that his counterparts, every one of them to a person, behaved exactly the way that we had anticipated. And so for every behavior, we had an action for our client to take.
That is awesome. So vennegotiation.com, Christine McKay, she's playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers. We'll be right back with you after 2 minutes break here on the International Business Growth Radio.